I used to think it was crazy how folks could just ditch a wedding at the last second or not even show up. I mean, tying the knot isn't something you decide on a whim, right? It's not like you roll out of bed one morning and go, "Hey, I reckon I'll get hitched today." Nah, it's a big deal, something you map out, chew over, and lock in with your whole heart. Or so I thought. Turns out, I was dead wrong. Sometimes you don't make it to the altar, and every now and then, you don't get a say in the matter. That's exactly the mess I landed in. 2 weeks before I was set to say, "I do," I found out my fiancée had been feeding me lies. And not little white ones either, the kind of betrayal that hits you like a freight train, knocks your world sideways, and leaves you doubting every damn thing you thought you knew. So what did I do? I didn't holler or throw punches or call the whole thing off. Nope. I cooked up a plan she'd never forget, something to stick with her for good. Then, when the time was ripe, I vanished, like smoke in the wind. I'm Ryan Hayes, by the way. Up until those 2 weeks before my wedding, I figured I had life pretty well sorted. I'm 32, born and bred in Dallas, Texas, proud of it, too. I was pulling down a solid living as a project manager at Caldwell & Rowe, one of the heaviest hitters in commercial construction around these parts. We didn't mess with little stuff like bungalows or shopping strips. We built the big dogs, towering skyscrapers, stadiums, projects with price tags in the millions. If you've ever cruised through Dallas, you've laid eyes on what we put up. I wasn't just getting by, I was killing it. 6-figure paycheck, a slick Ford F-150 Raptor courtesy of the company, an office downtown with those fancy floor-to-ceiling windows, and a name people trusted to get the job done. Work was a whirlwind, high stakes, cutthroat, and stressful as hell, but I thrived on that chaos. I knew damn well where my road was taking me. Then Olivia Morgan walked into my life. She wasn't the kind of gal you just glanced at, she hit you like a bolt of lightning before she even opened her mouth. We crossed paths at the Tipsy Owl, this bar over in Fort Worth, during my buddy Brandon's engagement bash. She strolled in like she ran the joint, blonde curls bouncing just right, green eyes that could stop traffic, heels tapping the hardwood floor like she was on a mission. I gave Brandon a nudge and muttered, "Who the hell's that?" He grinned and said, "Luxury real estate chick. Sells those $1 million pads up in Highland Park." Olivia had this vibe that made a guy want to up his game. She was sharp, self-assured, and had charm for days, the type who could talk some dude hunting a cheap apartment into dropping a fortune on a penthouse. She had that gift, and she'd flash it just right to make you feel like the king of the room. That night, we jawed on for hours. She cracked up at my corny jokes, asked about my job like it mattered to her, made me feel like a somebody worth a damn. By the time last call rolled around, I was a goner. We went steady for a year before I got down on one knee. I did it proper, Nick and Sam's Steakhouse, tucked away in a private booth, with a Cartier solitaire ring I had shipped in special from New York. I'd never shelled out that kinda cash on something so tiny, but for her. Worth every penny. Her eyes welled up when she saw it, and she blurted, "Yes," before I could even stumble through my big speech, then kissed me like I was all she'd ever need. Just like that, my tomorrow was locked in. The next 12 months were all about the wedding grind. I wasn't big on the nitty-gritty, so I let her steer the ship. She picked the Dallas Arboretum for the spot, fancy, pricey, totally her style. The guest list was stacked with her crowd, real estate hotshots, developers, folks from her high-flying world. I just signed the checks and kept my nose out of it. Everything was humming along smooth as could be. Then, 2 weeks before the preacher was set to pronounce us man and wife, I stumbled on that damn receipt. It was a regular old night, I just dragged myself home from work, still rocking my Caldwell & Rowe polo, kicking off my dusty boots. I swung open the fridge for a Shiner Bock, and there it was, a wadded-up receipt shoved half under some leftover takeout napkins. I almost blew it off. Olivia wasn't sloppy, she didn't leave stuff laying around like that. But something about it snagged my attention. I snatched it up. The Capital Grille, Uptown Dallas. Dated last Thursday. Paid cash. 2 steaks, 2 glasses of Cabernet, 1 dessert. She'd told me she was at her mom's place in Plano that night. My gut twisted up in a knot that felt all kinds of wrong. I tried talking myself down. Maybe it was a client dinner, maybe she grabbed a bite with a girlfriend. Maybe. I wanted to buy that story, but deep down, I wasn't born yesterday. That part of me that sniffed out crooked deals on multimillion-dollar jobs. It was screaming the truth loud and clear. I had to dig deeper. The next morning, I was up before the damn alarm even had a chance to yell at me. That crumpled receipt was just sitting there on my nightstand, parked right beside my watch and wallet like some kind of unwelcome guest. I reckon I must have fished it out of my pocket before crashing last night, but hell if I could remember doing it, that's how bad it was rattling around in my skull. I snatched it up, flattening it out against my hand with a slow drag of my fingers. The Capital Grille. 2 meals, 2 glasses of that fancy wine, 1 dessert. I stared at that thing for what felt like forever, flipping through every excuse I could dream up. Maybe it wasn't even hers. Could be her mom went out for a bite and Olivia just ended up with the slip by accident. Or maybe she really was at her mom's place, and this was some weird mix-up that didn't add up. But deep down, I wasn't buying my own bullshit. Olivia didn't mess with cash, she whipped out her Amex Platinum for every little thing, from gas station snacks to her overpriced lattes. And her mom? No chance she's kicking back in some swanky uptown steakhouse sipping Cabernet with some random +1. Nah, this had Olivia's fingerprints all over it, and that meant she'd flat out lied to my face. I threw on my usual getup, dark jeans, my Caldwell and Roe polo, and my trusty boots. Brewed some coffee, skipped the toast, and hauled ass to the office. I strolled in, tossed my truck keys on the desk with a clatter, and tried to glue my eyes to the computer screen. Didn't work worth a damn. By the time noon rolled around, I was done playing pretend. I ambled over to Ava Morales, my assistant, 27, sharp as a tack, the kind of gal who kept half my world spinning without so much as a hiccup. Gotta cut out early today, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. She cocked an eyebrow at me. You. Bailing early? That's a new one, Hayes. Yeah, personal crap, I muttered. Ava just shrugged like it was no skin off her back. Fine, but don't flake on that architect powwow at the site tomorrow. I gave her a nod, scooped up my keys, and bolted out the door. I rolled my black F-150 Raptor into a spot 2 blocks down from Olivia's office on McKinney Avenue, tucked just out of sight like a hunter stalking game. Clock hit 4:45 p.m. She'd be done at 5:30. I didn't have jack to do but sit there, so I kicked back in the seat, watching the city buzz around me like a kicked-over anthill. McKinney was a madhouse this time of day, sidewalks crawling with suits and tourists pouring out of cafes and burger joints. Those streetcars clanged along, pausing to let folks hop on and off. A couple of slick dudes in ties puffed cigars outside a whiskey joint, their loud laughs slicing through the hum of cars. My eyes stayed locked on the glass doors of Morgan and Clarkson Realty. Right at 5:37 p.m., there she was. Olivia strutted out like she was late for something big, rocking a tight white dress, those red-soled Louboutin heels that cost more than my truck payment, hair falling in soft waves that screamed effort. She always looked good, but this was next level, like she'd planned it down to the last curl. No way she was headed home. She marched straight to her white Range Rover Velar, popped the door, and slipped in smooth as silk. My hands clamped down on the steering wheel as her taillights flared red. I counted to 30 in my head, then eased out after her. She peeled south past Victory Park, blending into the downtown snarl of traffic. The sky was glowing gold, sun dipping low and setting those glass towers ablaze like something out of a painting. She didn't swing toward Plano where her mom lived, and she sure as hell didn't point toward home. Kept driving. Hit deep Ellum, hooked a turn onto Elm Street where the neon signs were just waking up over the bars and eateries. Place was hopping, folks spilling onto patios with beers, music floating out of open doors, couples giggling arm in arm. But Olivia wasn't there to party. She jerked a quick left onto a quieter stretch, and I eased off the gas, trailing back as she rolled into the valet lane at the Kimpton Pittman Hotel, some ritzy boutique joint, not the kind of spot you'd take a client for a quick chat. My knuckles went white around the wheel as she climbed out of her ride. She didn't hustle inside or glance around all twitchy. Just checked her phone, flicked her thumb across the screen, and flashed a little smile like she knew who was coming. Then, at 5:51 p.m., he showed up, black BMW M5, shiny as sin, tinted windows barely legal. Doors swung open, and out steps this guy, tall, dark hair, navy suit tailored so perfect it probably cost more than my rent. Looked like one of those Wall Street types who golfed on Fridays and sipped top-shelf scotch like it was Kool-Aid. Olivia sauntered over, and he laid one on her, not some half-assed peck, but a deep, easy kiss, like they'd been at it forever, like I was just a ghost who'd never been in the picture. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it thumping right up in my throat, every muscle in my body coiled up like a spring ready to snap. But I didn't budge an inch. Didn't slam the truck into park, didn't leap out hollering her name across the street like some lunatic. I just sat there, frozen, because in that split second, my whole damn world flipped upside down. For the past year, I'd been building a future with this woman, cutting checks for caterers, flower folks, and some fancy wedding planner, nodding along while she yammered about where Aunt Sue should sit and which tropical beach we'd hit for the honeymoon, grinning like an idiot every time she tossed out, "my fiancée," in that sweet tone of hers. And all that time, she was pulling this crap behind my back. I let out a long, shaky breath, prying my hands loose from the steering wheel one finger at a time. This wasn't the moment to blow a gasket. I had to play it cool, think sharp. I stayed parked outside that hotel for what felt like forever, my knuckles aching from squeezing the wheel so damn hard. Watched Olivia vanish inside with that slick bastard, my fiancée, the woman I was supposed to swap rings with in just 2 weeks. Anger didn't even hit me yet. I was ice cold, my head crystal clear, and I knew exactly what my next move had to be. I needed hard evidence. That's when Sullivan came to mind. His office was stashed out in Arlington, wedged between a grimy pawn shop and a Taco Bueno, no flashy sign, no perky secretary, just a beat-up metal door with a peeling "Sullivan Investigations" sticker and a buzzer that sounded half-dead. I rapped on it twice and shoved my way in. The stench slapped me right off the bat, old coffee, musty papers, and a cloud of cigarette funk. The AC was cranked to 11, but it didn't stand a chance against the thick, sticky Texas heat seeping through the cracked blinds. There he was, behind a cluttered desk, Sullivan, no first name, no chit-chat. Ex-cop, probably pushing late 50s, skin-baked tan from years of chasing leads under the sun. Guy was rocking a leather jacket even though it was 95 degrees out, a half-gone Marlboro Red dangling lazy between his fingers. "You're ahead of schedule," he rasped, flicking ashes into a styrofoam cup swimming with cold, burnt coffee. "Didn't book a time slot," I shot back. Sullivan eased back in his chair, sizing me up with those tired, seen-it-all eyes. His place was a disaster, piles of dog-eared case files, a rattly old fan wheezing in the corner, a landline phone straight out of the Reagan years. A dented filing cabinet slumped against the wall next to an ashtray spilling over with crushed butts. But I knew his type, guys who'd waded through every kind of dirt and didn't waste breath on pointless questions. "You really want to open this can of worms?" he asked, voice rough as a gravel road. I gave him a firm nod. He stubbed out his smoke, yanked a drawer open, and pulled out a yellow legal pad. "Okay, spill it. What's her name?" Olivia Morgan. Still my fiancée, at least for now. He let out a grunt, flipping to a fresh page. Got a hunch she's stepping out. I leaned my elbows on his desk, breathing slow. Last Thursday, she said she was at her mom's. Found a receipt from the Capital Grille, 2 dinners, 2 wines, cash payment. Sullivan scratched something down with a stubby pencil. Anything more? I eyed the yellow nicotine stains on his fingers. Tailed her yesterday. She headed to the Kimpton Pittman Hotel in Deep Ellum. Met some dude, black BMW M5, tall, dark hair. They locked lips. Saying it out loud for the first time hit like a punch to the gut. Sullivan didn't blink, just nodded and snapped the pad shut. Got a shot of him. I slid my phone across the desk. The pic was blurry as hell, snapped through my windshield, but it'd do. Sullivan squinted at it for a heartbeat, then shoved it back. Give me 7 days, he said. A week later, I was back in that smoky hole of an office. Sullivan didn't bother with a hello, just reached into his desk, fished out a manila folder, and chucked it onto the scratched-up surface. I stared at it like it might bite me before finally picking it up. Inside were photos, Olivia and Mr. BMW, caught red-handed. Hotel check-ins, late-night dinners, sneaky parking lot rendezvous, all stamped with dates and times. She's got a pattern, Sullivan said, sparking up another cigarette. Head straight from work to hook up with him. Sometimes it's a fancy meal, sometimes a hotel room. Always the same guy. My jaw locked up so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Sullivan flipped open another folder. Thought you'd want to know who you're dealing with. I glanced down. Name, Nathan Carter. Job, hedge fund big shot. Office, Carter and Dunn Capital, Uptown Dallas. Home, swanky high-rise condo on Turtle Creek Boulevard. Figures, a money man, probably spent his weekends swinging clubs at the country club, yapping about stocks and sipping overpriced whiskey like it was no big deal. Guy had cash to burn and not a shred of decency. My fingers dug into the folder so hard the edges bent. She's been cozying up to this guy for about 4 months now, Sullivan said, sucking in a lungful of smoke from his cigarette. 4 months. That hit me like a sledgehammer. While we were scoping out wedding spots, she was sneaking off to hotels with him. While I was shelling out cash for her perfect day, she was clinking wine glasses over dinner with this clown. While I was swearing to give her forever, she was tossing it all in the trash like it didn't mean a damn thing. She doesn't even try to hide it, Sullivan tacked on, exhaling a gray cloud. Gals like her. They don't quit. I snapped the folder shut. Felt like someone dropped a cinderblock square on my chest. I pushed to my feet. What's the damage? How much do I owe you? Sullivan flicked his hand like he was shooing a fly. This one's free, kid. I scrunched my brow. Why's that? He smirked, tapping ash into that grimy styrofoam cup. 'Cause I get a kick out of watching a guy finally open his eyes. I gave him a quick nod and hauled ass out the door. Back in my truck, I sat there for over an hour, hands locked around the steering wheel, staring at that manila folder Sullivan handed me. It was all laid out, proof in black and white. Olivia Morgan, the woman I was set to marry, had been running around with some hedge fund hotshot for 4 months. Guy with a shiny black BMW M5 and a ritzy condo uptown. While I was picking cardstock for invites, she was chowing down on steak with him. While I was locking in our honeymoon flights, she was shacking up in hotel rooms. While I was dreaming up our life together, she was lighting a match and burning it all down. No way in hell was I putting a ring on her finger, that much was obvious. But just slipping out the back door quiet like. Nah, that wasn't gonna cut it. She'd made a fool of me, and I was damn well gonna make sure she felt the sting right back. I pointed my truck toward our place in University Park and rolled in. Everything was just how I'd left it, neat, normal, untouched. Olivia wasn't around. She was off at some bridal fitting in Highland Park Village, probably sipping bubbly with her gaggle of bridesmaids, gabbing about the big day like she wasn't living a double life. I plopped down at the kitchen counter, eyes glued to the marble top. Rage, heartbreak, some kind of gut-punched betrayal, I should have been swimming in all that. But nope. I was laser-focused, cool as a cucumber. Needed a plan, not some sloppy showdown or a tear-soaked meltdown. Something sharp, unforgettable, a move that'd haunt her till her dying day. I snagged a pen and a sheet of paper from the living room desk and scratched out a note, "Olivia, I've got the whole picture now. Have fun at the wedding, I won't be showing up." Short and sweet, no drawn-out sob story, no finger-pointing, no pleading for why. Just the cold, hard truth. I folded it up, stuffed it in a plain white envelope, and sealed it tight. Ran my thumb along the edge, picturing her peeling it open at the altar with 200 pairs of eyes on her, her folks, her buddies, the whole damn crowd. I could see her face crumpling, the silence sucking the air out of the place. It was gold. I wasn't just bailing, I was dropping a bomb. Next day, I swung by my brother's place in Frisco. Luke Hayes, 3 years older, hitched, 2 rugrats running around. One of them was Jack, my 7-year-old nephew, all set to play ring-bearer at my wedding. Kid had been strutting around practicing his march, proud as a peacock, chattering about how he'd tote that little white pillow down the aisle like a champ. I pulled into Luke's driveway and killed the engine. He was out front, elbow deep in his Chevy Silverado, smearing grease off his hands when he clocked me climbing out of my truck. "Hey, man," he hollered, chucking the rag onto his workbench. "Didn't figure you'd swing by." I ambled over, hands jammed in my pockets. "Need a solid from you." Luke arched a brow. "What kinda solid?" I fished out the envelope and dangled it in front of him. "Want Jack to hand this off at the wedding." He wiped his palms on his jeans, squinting at me funny. "What's in there?" "A little something for Olivia. She'll get the drift when she opens it." His face tightened, picking up on the vibe. "Ryan, what's cooking here?" I blew out a breath, staring at the dirt under my boots. Could have spilled it all, shown him the folder, the snapshots, let him stew in the same pissed-off pot I was in. But I didn't. Wasn't fishing for a shoulder to cry on. This was about tying it up my way. "Just back me up on this," I said. "You in or out?" Luke gave me a long, hard look, then finally dipped his chin. "Yeah, I'm in." I dropped to a crouch, hollering for Jack, who was out in the yard booting a soccer ball around. "Hey, little man," I called as he bolted over. "Got a big job for you." His eyes lit up like Christmas. "Like a secret mission?" "Dead on, a mission," I said, pressing the envelope into his grubby hands. "At the wedding, skip the rings. Walk this up to the priest instead." Jack nodded, all business. "I'm on it." I messed up his hair with a grin. "That's my ace." He tore off, kicking his ball again, and I straightened up, meeting Luke's gaze. "You dead set on this?" he asked. "Damn straight," I said. With that, I spun around, hopped back in my truck, and peeled out. That night, I started packing, not just some weekend bag, but the whole deal. Yanked a duffel from the closet and crammed it with shirts, jeans, boots, whatever I'd need. Scooped up my laptop, passport, all the papers that mattered. Didn't leave a scrap behind. By the time Olivia waltzed through the door, I was locked and loaded to roll. And by the time she stood up there at the altar waiting for me to show, I'd be long gone, halfway across the map, out of her reach for good. The Dallas Arboretum was decked out like a damn postcard. White chairs stretched across the garden in neat rows, all pointed toward a fancy floral arch with White Rock Lake shimmering behind it. The joint was packed, 200 folks dolled up in their Sunday best, fanning themselves under that relentless Texas sun. A string quartet strummed away soft and sweet in the background, while waiters weaved through the crowd, balancing trays of bubbly. Everything was picture perfect, except for one little hiccup: the groom was nowhere in sight. Up front stood Olivia, looking like $1,000,000 in her custom Vera Wang dress. Her hair fell in those gentle waves she loved, makeup so spot on you'd think an artist painted her face. She'd spent the last year obsessing over every detail of this shindig: the blooms, the food, who sat where. It all had to be flawless, her way. But as the clock kept ticking, something felt off. People started squirming in their seats. Whispers buzzed through the air like flies. Her dad, William Morgan, kept sneaking peeks at his watch. Her mom, Margaret, clutched her champagne glass so tight her knuckles went white, muttering something to one of Olivia's bridesmaids. The priest up at the altar coughed into his fist. Any word on when the groom's showing up? Olivia flashed a tight smile, her grip on that bouquet turning her fingers pale. "He's coming," she said. "Just caught up somewhere." She couldn't have been more wrong, 'cause I wasn't stepping foot near that place. Right at 4:15 p.m., the music shifted gears. Head swiveled, everybody expecting me to come strolling down the aisle. But nope, it was Jack, my 7-year-old nephew, stepping up instead. He marched slow and steady, just like he'd rehearsed, only he wasn't toting a ring pillow. In his hands was a little silver platter with a lone white envelope sitting pretty on top. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like a wave. Folks swapped puzzled looks. Olivia's brow creased as she peered down at Jack, who handed the platter off to the priest like it was no big deal. The priest paused, eyeballing the scene, then gingerly lifted the envelope. He unfolded the note inside, and the air went dead quiet. He cleared his throat again and read it out loud. "Olivia, I've got the full story. Have a blast at the wedding, I won't be joining you." Those words dropped like a grenade. Gasps punched through the silence, a shiver running through the guests, voices spiking into a frantic hum. Olivia's face went ghost white. She wobbled a bit, her hands shaking around that bouquet. For once in her charmed life, Olivia Morgan didn't have the reins. Her mouth popped open, but nothing came out. Then her legs gave way, and she crumpled right there in front of 200 stunned onlookers. Bridesmaids scrambled to her side. Her mom let out a shriek. The priest stumbled back, still clutching the note like it might blow up in his hands. All hell broke loose. Margaret spun on my brother Luke, voice quivering. "Where is he? Where's Ryan at?" Luke just shook his head. "Long gone." And he nailed it, 'cause while Olivia was eating dirt, I was already at DFW Airport, stepping onto a flight bound for Denver. The plane reeked of recycled air and some dude's cheap aftershave. I sank into my window seat, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. All I had was a duffel bag, my phone, and a one-way ticket out of there. I powered my phone off before the wheels even left the ground. No texts, no calls, no nothing. I was a ghost, and Olivia wasn't ever laying eyes on me again. I touched down in Denver just as the sun was dipping low. Stepping off that plane, the knot in my chest started to ease up, not all the way, but enough to suck in a real breath. The air hit different here, sharp and cool, laced with pine and a hint of rain on the wind. Nothing like that thick, soupy Dallas heat. I grabbed a rental, a silver Chevy Malibu, and pointed it south toward Colorado Springs. It was a 2-hour haul down I-25, but I didn't give a damn. The Rockies loomed off to my right, their snowy tops scraping the sky. For the first time in ages, it felt like I was chasing something new instead of just hightailing it from a wreck. By the time I rolled into Colorado Springs, the sky had gone a deep, bruised purple, city lights twinkling against the dark foothills. I checked into some no-frills motel off Academy Boulevard, snagged a burger from a joint called Drifters, and holed up in my room, staring at the cracked ceiling. No calls buzzing in, no texts lighting up my phone, nobody had a clue where I'd landed, and that's just how I liked it. Come morning, I hit the reset button. Strolled into Rocky Mountain Developments, a solid mid-tier outfit that handled commercial builds all over Colorado, the kind of place that cared more about what you could do than what your resume bragged about. The boss, Mike Darnell, was a throwback construction type, gray beard down to his chest, hands rough as sandpaper, always sporting the same beat-up Carhartt jacket. He gave me a once-over when I stepped into his office, then kicked back in his chair. "You ever put up anything in mountain country?" he asked, voice like a growl. "Nope, sir. Back in Texas, I stuck to high-rises, stadiums, big office sprawls, city stuff," I told him. Mike gave a slow nod, gnawing on the end of a toothpick like it was a cigar. "Up here's a whole different beast. You're wrestling snow weight, wind gusts, shifting dirt, ain't nothing like slapping steel on flat ground. I pick things up quick," I said, meeting his stare. He sized me up for a good long stretch, then yanked a clipboard off his cluttered desk. "Got a gig lined up in Boulder, mixed-use deal, shops and apartments. Need somebody who can wrangle timelines and stop contractors from tearing each other's throats out. $75,000 a year. You in or out?" I was in. Just like that, I'd landed myself a paycheck. For the next year, I kept things low-key. Snagged a little place on the west edge of Colorado Springs, nestled up against the foothills. Wasn't fancy, couple bedrooms, a garage, a deck with a killer view of the mountains, but it was all mine. Ditched the F-150 Raptor for a Toyota Tacoma, didn't need anything screaming, "Look at me," anymore. Stayed clear of social media, kept my nose to the grindstone, worked my ass off. If anybody asked why I bailed on Texas, I'd just shrug and say I needed a new backdrop. Folks didn't pry, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't checking my rearview mirror. Then Emily Parker came along. Met her about 6 months into the Boulder job. She was a structural engineer, damn good one, too, sharp as a tack and knew her craft inside out. First time I laid eyes on her, she was out on the site, hard hat on, steel-toe boots planted firm, laying into some subcontractor about load-bearing walls. "You don't just carve out extra space for pipes," she snapped, hands parked on her hips. "Mess with the frame, and this whole thing's a pile of junk." The plumber puffed up, rolling his eyes. "Been at this 20 years, sweetheart." Emily didn't flinch. "Yeah. Well, I've got a master's in structural engineering, so unless you've figured out how to bend physics, we're sticking to my plan." I couldn't help but smirk. Girl had guts. After the plumber stomped off in a huff, I sauntered over. "Looks like you're winning hearts out here," I said. She let out a tired breath. "Guys get all prickly when you point out they ain't God's gift to construction." "True story," I said. "We're a sensitive bunch." She cracked a grin. "At least you own it, Hayes." I cocked an eyebrow. "You know who I am?" "I skimmed the site reports," she shot back. "Guess some folks don't." Right then, she had me hooked. Emily was the polar opposite of Olivia. Olivia was all gloss and glamour, Emily was straight-up practical. Olivia obsessed over how things looked, Emily gave a damn about making them work. No head games, no chasing cash or clout, she was just herself, and I didn't even know how bad I'd been craving that. We started grabbing coffee after meetings, then lunch here and there. One day, she hit me with, "Wanna hike this weekend?" I balked. "I don't do hiking." "You're in Colorado now, buddy," she said. "Hiking's mandatory." So I shelled out for some Merrell boots and a backpack, trailing her up Red Rock Canyon open space. By the time we hit the top, I was gasping, sweat soaking through my shirt. Emily just flashed that grin. "Not too shabby, huh?" I wheezed out a laugh. "I'm cursing your name right now." "Nah, you're not." She was dead right. We started going out, no big flashy dates, no over-the-top schemes, just chill, easy hangs, scarfing tacos from a truck, sprawled on her couch with a movie, ragging on cheesy reality TV. Easiest thing I'd ever fallen into, no stress, no second guessing, just us. A year later, I slid a ring on her finger. Kept the wedding small, no churches, no long-winded toasts, no bloated guest list. Just me and her in a field near Manitou Springs, swapping the only words that counted. First time in a long stretch, I felt genuinely good. For a while, I figured I'd outrun her for good. New town, new gig, new life, I played it smart. No social media footprints, no chats with old Dallas pals, no threads tying me back to that mess. I'd vanished clean. But Olivia? She wasn't the type to let sleeping dogs lie. Should have seen it coming that she'd track me down. At first, it was radio silence. For months after I torched that wedding, I kept waiting for the blowback, pissed off voicemails, emails, maybe some goon banging on my door. Zilch. I figured she was too mortified to deal, that she'd scraped herself together and moved on, same as me. But about 6 months into my fresh start in Colorado Springs, my phone lit up with a call from Luke, my brother. "You ain't gonna believe this crap," Luke said, his tone caught somewhere between a chuckle and a groan. I kicked back in my chair, eyeballing Pike's Peak through the window. "Hit me with it. Olivia's out there smearing your name all over town. Telling folks you ditched her at the altar, 'cause you were stepping out on her." I damn near snorted. "That's a hell of a twist." "It gets juicier," Luke added. "She's got herself a lawyer now. Patrick Delacroix." That name snapped me upright real quick. Delacroix wasn't just any suit, he was one of Dallas's top dogs in civil litigation, the kind of shark who didn't swim unless the water was deep with six-figure cash. Olivia sicking him on me? That spelled one thing loud and clear: she was out for blood. I dug into it. Delacroix wasn't your run-of-the-mill attorney, he was a wrecking ball, didn't just aim to win, he wanted to crush you so bad you'd never scrape yourself off the pavement. And that's exactly what Olivia was bankrolling him to do to me. She kicked things off sneaky. First move was a defamation lawsuit, claimed that little note I left her with trashed her good name for good, said she was a wreck from the shame I piled on, swore her job took a hit, her buddies bailed, her whole damn life went off the rails, 'cause of my stunt. Made me wanna laugh out loud. Texas being a one-party consent state meant I could have dumped every shred of proof about her cheating right in the open, and it'd still be fair game. But this wasn't about courtroom wins for her, it was about yanking me back into her messed up little world. Then the whispers started. She spun tales to anybody who'd listen, said I'd been a controlling bastard, locked her away from folks, twisted her head with mind games, had her so scared she couldn't ditch me even when she knew she should've. All of it was a damn show, polished up nice to paint her as the damsel in distress. Some swallowed it whole, some saw through the act, but it didn't matter a lick, I wasn't around to set the record straight, and that ate her alive. Her lawsuit never got legs. For one, she didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning. For another, she couldn't track me down. No address on file, no social media breadcrumbs, no digital tracks to sniff out. I'd buried myself so deep in Colorado Springs even a big-shot Dallas lawyer couldn't claw me out. She even tried leaning on Luke once, hounding him to cough up my whereabouts. "You think I spilled?" Luke cackled when he called me about it. Let her ramble at me for an hour, then sent her chasing her own tail. She had cash, connections, and a fire of pure spite driving her, but no way to get her hands on me, and that just stoked her fury hotter. Then one day, she caught up. It was a crisp Thursday in October, 2 years since I'd peeled out of Dallas. I was at Gold Camp Roasters, this cozy little coffee spot downtown in Colorado Springs, always smelled like fresh ground beans and a hint of cinnamon. I was in line, waiting on my usual black coffee and a breakfast burrito, thumbing through work emails on my phone. Didn't clock her at first, not till that sharp, familiar voice cut through the hum. Well, look who's finally done hightailing it. I spun around, and there she stood, Olivia Morgan, 3 feet off, clutching a Chanel bag, wrapped in a snug wool coat and rocking heels that screamed money, way too fancy for Colorado dirt. For a beat, I just stared. Wasn't shocked she'd sniffed me out, what threw me was that she still gave enough of a damn to bother. Her face hadn't changed much, but something was off. That cocky swagger was still there, sure, but now it had this edge, something desperate, like she'd spent 2 years hunting a shadow and now that she'd cornered it, she didn't have a clue what came next. I took a long, slow pull from my coffee. Olivia. Her lips mashed into a thin line. That's it? That's all you've got for me? I flicked my eyes over to the barista, who was eyeballing us like we were the morning's free entertainment. This ain't exactly the spot for a heart-to-heart, huh? Olivia barked out a short, biting laugh. Oh, I reckon we've got a whole mess to chew over, Ryan. I let out a sigh, plunking my cup down on the counter. All right then, I said. Let's hash it out. I strode out the door, not to bolt, not to dodge her, but to put this thing in the ground for good. Didn't need to roll out the welcome mat. Olivia Morgan never waited for an invite in her life, and she wasn't about to start playing polite now. She breezed right past me into my house, those high-dollar heels clacking on the hardwood, trailing a whiff of ritzy perfume and that sticky Texas vibe. I eased the door shut behind her, cool as a breeze, no shake in my hands. She was banking on something else. Figured she'd catch me solo, a guy who'd hightailed it from his troubles and had jack to show for it. Instead, she walked into the life of a man who'd left her in the dust. Her gaze darted around the place, the wide-open layout, the chunky stone fireplace, the wedding pics perched on the mantel. One snapped her focus hard, a shot of me and Emily from our day in Manitou Springs. No frilly gown, just us two in a field with the mountains stretching out behind. Olivia's face went chalky. "You're hitched," she said, voice flat. I cracked a grin. Yup. She blinked like I'd spoken some foreign tongue. Her jaw popped open, then clamped shut. I could practically hear the wheels spinning, her trying to wrestle this curveball into the tale she'd spun about me. After a beat, she let out a little laugh, half stunned. Well, damn, that didn't take long. Not really, I said, shrugging. Couple years now. She dragged a polished hand through her hair, scrambling to get her footing back. Guess I shouldn't be shocked. You always did leap before looking. I arched a brow. Leapin', huh? She folded her arms, tipping her chin up like she was sizing me up. Come on, Ryan, don't act like you played it grown-up. You bailed on me at the altar. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Nah, Olivia. You torched it all the second you figured a ring didn't mean squat. Her face shadowed over. I just wanted a little fun before we locked it down. It wasn't a big deal. I stared her down, waiting her out. She huffed, tossing her hair back. Anyway, she tacked on, I didn't cheat on you, not legally. That cracked me up, a short, dry chuckle. I turned and ambled into the kitchen. She paused, then trailed after me, heels clicking like she was storming a damn meeting. I snagged a ceramic mug from the shelf and poured myself a fresh jolt from the stainless steel coffee maker on the counter, no hurry, no twitch in my step, 'cause I'd already come out on top. Olivia propped herself against the counter, eyeing me close. You shamed me, she hissed, voice cutting like a blade. I sipped my coffee slow. Did I now? Her jaw locked up tight. You trashed my whole world, Ryan. You got any idea how tough it was to patch things up after you split? How many folks I had to face, how many lies I had to spin to convince them I wasn't just some dumped bride. I set my mug down easy. You mentioned Nathan Carter to them. Her mouth slammed shut like a trap. I gave a little nod. Figured not. She shook her head, air puffing out her nose sharp. I don't even know why I bothered coming here. I thought, she cut herself off, eyes sliding away. I tilted my head a touch. What? Thought I'd still be a wreck. Moping around some dive bar, drowning my sorrows. She didn't say a word, and that's when it clicked. Olivia wasn't here to bury the hatchet or say sorry. She'd come out on top. For 2 years, she'd been chasing my shadow, throwing cash at lawyers, spreading bull, hell-bent on making me pay for what I'd done. Now, standing here in my kitchen, staring at Emily's mug on the counter, at the photo on the wall, at the life I'd pieced back together without her in it, she saw it clear as day, she'd lost the game, and it was eating her alive. I brushed past her and yanked open a drawer in the living room desk. There it was, that beat-up manila folder Sullivan handed me back in Texas. I'd hung on to it not, 'cause I was stewing in spite, but 'cause I had a gut feeling this showdown was coming someday. I snatched it up and spun back to Olivia, dangling it in front of her. Get a good eyeful, I said. I slung it onto the coffee table. The folder skidded across the polished wood, coming to a stop right under her nose. Olivia's fingers twitched like she wasn't sure she wanted to touch it. After a beat, she reached out slow, scooped it up, and cracked it open. The color drained from her face. Inside were the goods, pictures, all stamped with dates. Her and Nathan Carter at the Capital Grille, cozy as hell. Her strolling into some swanky uptown Dallas hotel. Her and Nathan in a parking lot, standing close enough to share a heartbeat. 4 months of cold, hard evidence. She leafed through it quiet like, her breaths coming uneven. Then those green eyes of hers snapped up to mine, icier than I'd ever seen them. You held on to this stuff? You bet. Her lip curled just a touch. What for? I gave a lazy shrug. Figured you'd pull something like this down the line. A thick, heavy silence stretched out between us. She swallowed hard, snapping the folder shut, dragging a trembling hand through her hair. You reckon this puts you above me? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head slow. Nah, Olivia. Just proves I've got a better head on my shoulders. She locked eyes with me, staring long and hard. Then, at last, she stood, snagging her Chanel bag off the counter. Not a peep more, she just marched to the door. Her hand hovered on the knob for a second, like some parting shot was itching to spill out, but she choked it back. She twisted the handle, stepped out, and let the door click shut behind her. I stood there a minute, ears tuned to the fading tap of her heels down the driveway. Then I ambled back to the kitchen, grabbed my coffee, and dropped into a chair at the table, no jitters, no fire in my gut, just calm. Olivia Morgan was out of my life for good, and I never laid eyes on her again.